Hello, hello, hello. It is time for another weekly project update down here at St. Simon's Elementary School. And this update is especially important because it marks the last day of school. Woohoo! Summer break is here, which means it is time for us to sprint towards the finish line and get this project wrapped up. All right, starting things off on the interior of our campus, you can see that we got our concrete poured for our bell tower. Our steel will be arriving tomorrow for this bell tower, as well as the two canopies that we have at the front of the school on Ocean Boulevard. We also poured some flat work, that sidewalk that serves between the front of the admin building and the back of the house, and then connects to that canopy that goes over here to our two-story classroom building. You can also see it looks like we've isolated some bricks and painted them. We're actually doing the opposite of that. We are removing paint and stain from them as a part of our brick masonry restoration efforts. So that's what's going on there. Over here, we have some flat work that we really screwed up. And it's unfortunate. Cost us a good bit of money, about $9,000 in material alone, but it was wrong. So we poured that yesterday. We ripped it up this morning, and we are regrading to replace and fix all of the deficiencies that we would have otherwise had. Some of those deficiencies include the center line expansion joint. Again, at the end of the day, this thing will have an anodized aluminum canopy, very similar to the one that we just saw, and that expansion joint was in the wrong spot. So if you were at the end of the day standing here looking down the canopy, it would have looked off kiltered. We want to make sure that that expansion joint is centered underneath the canopy and doesn't interfere with where our fencing that's going to go underneath the canopy to segregate public and private traffic is going to be installed. That was one issue. The second issue was just general readiness. Our contractor ordered the concrete and they weren't quite ready to place it. So that left it sitting in the parking lot. Concrete's really only good for about 90 minutes after it's batched. You want to have it all poured out after that 90-minute mark. And some of our concrete was over 2 hours old. So it started setting up on us, didn't have a good finish. So that was problem number 2. And then problem number 3 is that our handicap ramps, which American Disabilities Act, ADA, enforces regulations on handicap ramps, those weren't right. Those have minimum 4% slopes. And so we needed to make sure that that was remediated so that we don't set ourselves up for a lawsuit. So big miss, big swing and a miss. We screwed it up. It won't be the last time that we screw something up. And it definitely is not the first time that we've screwed something up. The big thing is that we learn what we did wrong. Our subcontractor learns what we did wrong, and we move on from it. So that's the interior of the campus. After we get our steel next week, we won't necessarily erect this. Hopefully we get to it. If not, no big deal. We're going to prioritize the front of the house first with our structural steel, but we are starting to eye things like finished flat work, storm drainage. We've talked about storm drainage before. They're going to start over here to catch roof drains. Not really a roof drain, but a drip line from the roof, and then feed that towards the center of what will be our running track here, and then connect into our main piping in the parkway. So that's the interior of our site, interior of the campus. Wide open for summer, which is good. Otherwise, we would have had teachers parking all along here for the general traffic and buses coming in throughout the day. We can really start getting to work. That's the inside. Let's walk over here and see what we've got going on with our teacher dining area. All right, walking over here to our teacher dining area. That is our teacher dining area. Beyond is our cafeteria. You can see that we haven't really changed much. The only thing that we've changed is really adding some plywood sheathing to infill that opening that was once a hollow metal framed door. And what's important here is to note that now that we've completed our abatement in the cafeteria, and now that school is out for the summer, we can resume our masonry efforts. Our owner was previously, for the last 2 weeks, they were taking food out the back of the house, out of their kitchen that we built them, and running it up this access road to the gymnasium in order to serve students. Now that we don't have that constraint in effect, we can bring lulls and masonry equipment and mortar mixers back in here. And so over here, talking about the plywood, we had our metal framed stud, which is on the interior of all of our exterior walls as part of our new construction, but we've put this plywood so it's a form material instead of just vertical studs for our spray foam contractor to install spray foam on our exterior walls. That's something that's going on site this week. Getting back to the benefit of not having to deal with student and occupant traffic of the campus and eyeing masonry, now we can resume our masonry infill. So that's going to be the next thing that happens here. We're going to masonry infill here, here, over there and around the corner. Then we'll install an air barrier. Then we're going to install our brick veneer. We might mix up our sequence of events with that to do our metal framing for our EFIS before we do our brick veneer, but that's a judgment call that we can make in the field. Next thing to talk about here is getting our cafeteria. So last 2 weeks, really the last week, we were abating our cafeteria, which is this larger portion of the building. That abatement has been complete, and now I can walk into this building and it looks totally different. You can see this teacher workstation and its layout. Right now I'm walking into what will be the teacher's workstation. And right here, there will be an ice maker over here for them to use. There will be a wet wall so that they've got a sink and some cabinetry. And then into here, they will have a restroom. And you can see that that restroom is roughed in with that right there, which is sanitary sewer for a toilet. Jumping over here, they've got a storage room, but the big meat and potatoes and what we absolutely want to highlight as a project milestone is our cafeteria. This is once where our students ate. Over there is the kitchen we completed for them last year, and you can make sense of the fact that they served food out of the back of the house of the kitchen and then up to the gym. On the inside of the cafeteria, you can see that we've got our metal stud furring in place, and we've demoed out a previous existing ceiling. That's what's going on with our cafeteria. One big issue that I'm going to talk about once I get up onto the roof is our steel joist here. Not even steel joist, our wooden joist. So this is an older building. Typically you would see steel joist in an installation like this, but here you have wood. And not to spoil the surprise, but this wood has started to sag, and because of that, it's complicated our re-roofing efforts, and it might impact our schedule on completing our cafeteria, which is critical because we want to do everything we can over the summer so that they regain occupancy of not only the classrooms that we started working on first, but this cafeteria, so that students, when they return back from summer break, have a place to eat their lunch. Let's go check out what we've got going on with our classrooms and what we have done in the last week. All right, looking at our classrooms and what we have completed in the last week, you can see that our exterior walls look a little different, and that is because we installed our spray foam insulation. That is what that blue stuff is. You can actually hear, and hopefully it's not too invasive, that they're using their spray foam machine right now. These guys are trying to wrap up what they've got going on so that they can get out of here. The other thing that we talked about last week was plumbing rough-in and overhead makeups and fire suppression. You can see that we've completed our plumbing rough-in not only in the wall, but also overhead, which is what that is right there. And we've also started our fire sprinkler rough-in, which is what this black piping is right there. That's really the progress that we've made forward with our classrooms. We are starting to think about our door frames and hanging drywall. Looking at our corridor, we talked about main utility connections. You won't see any main utility connections for our fire sprinkler line because that is an active line right now. It goes all the way from our phase 3 building behind me down to our kitchen that we completed, and also over to our admin building that we've completed. And so if that got tapped into right now for us to connect our branch lines, then we would trigger a fire alarm. However, you can see that in our plumbing lines, we have connected that out. So really the only thing that we lack with our plumbing overhead and in-wall rough in is getting our line insulated. So that's what's going on with our classrooms. We've continued the same sequence of events of metal framing, utility installation, overhead, rough ends, and makeup. And that would be in our conference room here, also at a water cooler, connecting corridor, and then a clinic. And I'm not going to bore you with talking about all that stuff again, but you should be familiar at this point if you've been following along. What's up, man? Doing great. If you've been following along, that there was once a temporary partition here, and that temporary partition was a corridor that served from the admin building there and then left into our kitchen. Because school's out now, we've gotten that out the way, and you can see that it has really opened things up. Sorry about turning off your music.
Oh, it's okay.
I'll turn it back on for you.
No, it's fine. Sorry about that.
You can see that it's out the way, right? And so now you can really visualize what this thing's going to look like at the end of the day. This will be a connecting corridor that serves into an administration building. Down there, you've got double doors that go into a 2-story classroom. And then over here to my right, you've got your cafeteria, which connects to your kitchen. And so big strides forward. We're off to the races on the inside. Hopefully we're off to the races with our cafeteria. However, the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this week's update is our roof, and I'm about to go hop up there now. All right, I made it. Golly, I hate ladders. I'm standing up on top of the cafeteria existing roof after that ugly green built up sheet metal roofing has been removed. And you can see that marked in green are basically elevation shots. And the big problem with this roof is that it slopes in towards the center of the building, which is the exact opposite of what a roof should do. And we think that that's twofold as to why. We think that the wood truss have settled naturally as buildings settle, and then also the implied load of that sheet metal roofing that was installed onto this thing has caused those roof joists to settle. And because of that, we are now weighing what to do with this. Do we add in a little bit of tapered insulation so that we force slope? And the piece to that puzzle is, can the joist handle the additional weight of that insulation? And the second option is, well, shit, do you just rip the whole thing off and start with new? 100% the best option. If budget is not in mind and time is not in mind, is to re-roof this thing. However, because we're pushing so hard for the cafeteria to be occupied when they come back to school after summer, it really is a question of time as opposed to cost. So what has happened with this thing is we've gotten our architect involved and said, hey, Mr. Architect, what do you want to do? This thing is not how we anticipated it. And he got his structural engineer that did all of his structural engineering for this job to come out and take a look and advise recommendations and see if the weight of our proposed additional taper insulation can be handled by the roof joist, or if additional structural framing is needed. Here, if we take a close-up look, disregard that right there, that's an old chimney. You can really see that this thing slopes inward towards the center of the building. So that's what's going on with our roof. Just a summary recap of this week on the interior of the site over there. Maybe we can walk over and get a good vantage point. You can see that, man, we got a ton of building materials over there. Over there, we were doing concrete. Steel's gonna come this week for it. Next week we'll be eyeballing steel. We're gonna start with our steel for this canopy that we're gonna build out. And then the next thing will be a canopy that goes on the underside of this. On the interior of the building, we've got our spray foam being installed. We're eyeing sheetrock for our classrooms as we make up overhead utilities. And on the interior of our cafeteria, we've gotten our metal studs installed. However, it is a big question mark as to what is next as we deal with our roofing. That's the update. Hope